Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2023 World War II action film, Sisu. Now, Sisu was a film that I actually saw in the theater when it came out. I saw it with a friend of mine for my birthday, and I had a blast. I enjoyed it. I liked it quite a bit. I initially had intended to make a video soon after, but then I got caught up with some other stuff and it just didn't really happen. And in hindsight, I'm glad that I waited because I watched this again recently for this review and I didn't like it as much. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I thought it was a bad film. No, I still think it's a good movie, but I wouldn't call this a great film. And I will explain why soon enough. But before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, I would like to give a special shout out to Greg for requesting this video. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. Link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Sisu is a film written and directed by Jalmari Helander. And Jalmari Helander, he did a couple other films before this. He did Rare Exports and Big Game. I haven't seen Big Game, but I did see Rare Exports, and I honestly wasn't a big fan of it. Out of the films that I've seen from him, I would say that this is the one that I like the most. But even in something like Rare Exports, you could see that this is a guy who definitely has a good sense of style and flair to his direction. And Sisu is no exception. Like, it's a very stylish, slick, polished looking film despite its lower budget. And he's really at his best when it comes to showcasing the just absolutely lavish and lovely setting of the Laplands and all of the other location shots that he utilizes throughout the film. There's some absolutely just dazzling and breathtaking vistas and direction in this when it comes to wide shots or establishing shots. And he's fine too when it comes to the action. He definitely does know how to shoot a lot of action sequences that are very up close and personal and brutal and make you wince and definitely do provide a shot of adrenaline, so to speak. I think he's better when it comes to hand combat than gunplay. But I think he definitely does show that he's very capable when it comes to directing action sequences. And this is a hard project, a hard film to pull off because there's not really much of any dialogue. There's a bit here and there from various different characters, but there's a lot of scenes in this where there's not really a lot of dialogue, especially most of the scenes featuring the film's lead in Atami, who is pretty much mute for the majority of the movie. It's almost like you assume that he doesn't speak, but actually he can. But the director, who also is the writer, just decided to make him a man of very few words and a man who is more representative of his actions than anything else. And I think that definitely does take a certain quality of director to pull that off. And I think Helander did an honorable job doing that. So it's a film that I feel there are some moments where the low budget definitely does show. But I feel the director still, for the most part, did a solid job covering that up throughout the film. And yeah, it's a well directed movie. I would say, consistency wise, one of the best things about this film, other than the performance by the lead, who is playing Atami, is the direction by Helander. Now, and the cinematography, which it was by Kajil Lagaruz. and other technical elements too, like the editing. Now, the film is also written by Jalmari Helander, and there are some things about this script that work very well, and I think are definitely a highlight of the movie. But then there's other things that are faulty and uh, don't really work quite as well. And I think the script is definitely where this film is ultimately held back from its full potential. It starts out really great. I think it does a really good job establishing the overall setting and the historical context of the story. I think it's a rather inspired choice to make this take place at the tail end of World War II. That's not really something that you see that often in these kind of films. So that is definitely an element that helps it stand out from other movies like it. And I do like the way that it's broken up into parts. It's another way to make it have a different sort of feel when it comes to the overall pacing and structure of the story. And I think it works. And I like the way that it opens up, establishing a Tommy as this relatively unassuming old man who's a farmer just trying to make ends meet, going through life day by day with his dog and sifting for gold in the hopes that he might be able to strike it rich. And then when he does find all this gold, it's actually something that's rather cathartic, and you genuinely do feel happy for him. And this is prior to knowing anything about his past. So it does a good job establishing a pretty firm contrast between the different sides and different parts of Atami as a character. So then when you see him revert back to this immortal killer, it's actually something that is a little shocking the first time around. And I think that that also helps him become a much more sympathetic and engaging character, despite the fact there really isn't a lot of dialogue for him, and the fact that he had such a bloody past. And I will give the film this, like when the Nazis show up, when the I don't know if they're SS guys. Yeah, there are some SS soldiers. So when Heldorf shows up with the rest of his unit, and they start giving a Tommy hell and start messing with him, the film definitely becomes a rather bloody and rather enjoyable action film, at least for the first like 20-30 minutes, where they're continuing to hound him. He has enough. He eventually starts fighting back, stabs one of the Nazis in the head, um, takes a bunch of the other Nazis out in various different ways, and winds up showcasing his deadly skills in crowd pleasing fashion. And it's a nice it's definitely a good idea to have an older man do all of this, because that's something that you don't see as much of either. And so he takes out all these Nazis and even uses his wits to take out a bunch of them with some mines, because he goes into a minefield. And because Heldorf knows that he's got all of this gold, and and his other members of his unit realize the gravity of the situation, that if they go back to Germany and they don't have enough gold and they don't have enough stuff to be able to find a way to buy their way to freedom or buy their way out of being incarcerated and eventually hung, they're going to be screwed. So they have this whole shared mindset of survival that coincides with Atami's, where they want the gold and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get it because that's their ticket to survival. And just like with Tommy, that's his ticket out of this dead end uh, part of his life that he's stuck in right now. This is his ticket to paradise, so to speak. Now he can retire in the lap of luxury and anonymity, and he can go to a place where he doesn't ever have to worry about bringing out the dark side of him ever again. And so there definitely is a very solid driving force when it comes to the motivation for these two people and their ideologies and everything that is ultimately starting to butt its head. And that's why when you see the just sense of desperation from Heldorf, where he's just going farther and farther to try to get this gold, to the point where he's just willingly like sending a good chunk of his own men to die, go into the minefield. But it's a minefield. It doesn't matter. Go in there. Or yeah, you go in the water. Yeah, I know he's in the water and he's hunting uh their fellow soldiers like their prey, and he's a shark. But I need that gold, so get in there. And it gets to the point where even one of his soldiers is like, "Fuck this," is trying to use the boat and row away, and so that leads to his commanding officer making the command to shoot him. And so the pacing of this story and the overall structure of it for like the first 30 minutes or so, maybe 40 minutes, is actually rather tight. It's rather exciting, rather thrilling. There's a good variety of action sequences, there's a good variety of kills, and it definitely does seem like okay, you got the makings of a potential genre classic here. And then it starts introducing this group of women that were captured by the Nazis, and you have this scene where Atami is cornered and tricked by the Nazis who tied like a bomb to his dog, and it winds up blowing up after he rips it off the dog. So he saves the dog, but it discombobulates him. And that leads to him getting hung by the Nazis, and the film sags at that point because now there's no action at all, and he's just there hanging, and he eventually gets off the noose when a plane flies by and rattles the sign that he was hung on to. And then he takes out the pilots, takes out the guys who were in the plane. He takes the plane and flies away. And then he sets up a roadblock with the plane. I like this touch where he puts one of the pilots in the plane with a noose around its neck, which is the same noose that they used to hang a Tommy. So I like the mind games that he plays with the Nazis. But then you have this really out of place scene with this girl who is I'm trying I think I don't know exactly who this girl is. I'm looking up yeah, I know. Okay, that's who it is. I know. So I know she's a part of the group of girls who were kidnapped by these Nazis and held captive. And she has this speech where she talks to these other Nazis that are in the truck with them, with the girls, and starts talking about Atami, and has this whole thing about, it can't be reasoned with, blah, 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 blah. He will not stop. And I'm like, so is this just Helander copying and pasting Kyle Reese's speech from the Terminator? It cannot be stopped. And he will not stop ever until you are dead. It's the same kind of thing, and it just seems very drawn out and very long-winded, and I think it's attempting to try to be an extra layer of badassery and making Atami into even more of a larger than life iconic figure, but the execution just felt forced to me. And then you have like a whole truck full a whole truck full of Nazis, and after she says this whole spiel and talks about Tommy shows up, kills the two guys, gives all the women these guns, and now it's like Fury Road. And you have a whole truck full of Nazis, which really would have been a set piece for a really enjoyable, crazy, wild, gory action sequence with a Tommy doing the killing, but instead it's just the girls firing their guns and taking out the Nazis in like 30 seconds or less. So that's a bit of a letdown. And I didn't really care about that subplot anyway. And I don't really feel it added that much to the movie. It just felt like it was just thrown in there because Fury Road is a thing. And now Atami, because most of the unit that Heldorf was heading has been taken out by either Anya or Atami. Now Atami basically is able to face off against Heldorf one on one because his other secondary man, I think his name, yeah, Wolf. He got his ass kicked by Tommy, and then he was also captured by the women. And the guy who was driving the tank, he also got taken out. So now it's just the SS officer, the guy who was the head of the unit, Bruno Heldorf, and he commandeers a plane. He gets this other guy to fly for him, and Atami winds up getting onto the plane with a pickaxe and somehow carves his way through the bottom of the plane and gets into the plane. And then you have a pretty good fight scene between Heldorf and Atami. It's definitely got a lot of like bone crunching moments and stuff where Heldorf is using a belt and whipping Atami with it and using it to punch him in the face, and leads to a great moment where he tries to whip Atami with it again, but then Atami grabs it and then uh, takes the belt and chokes him with it and ties it to a bomb and then drops a bomb and blows up Heldorf. So I definitely did like that. I felt that was definitely a very fitting comeuppance for the main bad guy. It was very explosive, definitely a crowd pleasing moment. Good way to end the fight. And Tommy survives a plane crash after because the pilot died of some wounds. And he climbs himself out of this bog and then winds up going to this bank and unloads all his gold and asks for bills. And that's the end of Sisu. And of course, the women, they all freed themselves as well, and they're all safe and sound, and they're across the border, and I think they went to Russia or whatever. And I think it could be Russia, but I'm not entirely sure. Okay, it's Finland. They 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 arrived in front of a Finnish army unit, and so that is their subplot, and that's how that concludes. So Atami survives. He gets his gold. The dog is also fine too. They didn't do anything to the dog, like John Wick. And it's just one of those stories that's very straightforward, very simple. but I think there is a certain effectiveness to it. But I also feel that it could have used more action, and I also felt that the whole stuff with Anyo and the women, I just felt that was tacked on, and I do feel it's got some pacing problems because it sags in the middle. Like as soon as he gets hung, he's just hanging there. I understand why it's there, but it just feels like for something that was marketed as this fast and furious and glorious bit of carnage and relentlessly brutal movie, like that isn't relentless. That's honestly stopping things to a standstill. So I also feel that the villain is very weak and lackluster. There's nothing to this guy. Okay, he's somewhat intimidating of a presence. He can swing a punch, but he's a boring villain, and the script doesn't really do a good job, let alone a great job, of really providing this bad guy Heldorf with a personality. So when you have Sisu who doesn't really say anything and just really shows a lot of his personality through his actions and his movements, or maybe a look on his face. When you have a villain that's just so bland, it really hampers the film. It really hampers the story. So I definitely feel that that was definitely something that could have been handled better. And so it's just one of those scripts that I think there's a lot about it that I do like, but then there's a fair amount of things that I wasn't as big on. So I think the script is absolutely what holds this back from being a classic, being a genuine cult classic. Now, the cast, I think there's only really one performer that does a terrific and tremendous performance, and that's Jorma Tommila, who plays Atami. Like he was amazing. It was incredible. Like especially when it comes to him able to showcase so many different emotions without really saying anything. That's not an easy thing to do. And he was believable when it comes to the action sequences. I bought that he was a grizzled old veteran killer who had a body count that was unheard of. And I felt that he really did showcase his skills very well and very believably and very efficiently. And I genuinely do feel it was a really good performance. So a big part of why this film works is because of Jorma and because of his performance in the film. Aksel Hennie, who plays Bruno, Axel, he is not bad. He's just not really a memorable villain. It's not a memorable performance. It's just kind of in one ear out the other. He almost kind of feels like the side boss, almost like the equivalent of like one of the muscular Nazis that Indiana Jones would fight in an Indiana Jones movie who had like a few lines of dialogue. Like it almost is that kind of thing. But now he's like the main villain. Not really enough personality, not really enough charm, not really enough to this guy. Just kind of there. Jack Doolan is more the same as Wolf, his second hand man, who honestly, I can't be the only one. Like this guy, he looks like he's related to John C. Riley. Like he really does. Like like the two look like they are brothers. So I kept thinking of I kept thinking of other films featuring this actor. So I kept thinking of Talladega Nights, Shake and Bake, when I was looking at this guy. It's no offense to Jack, but I mean that's just the vibe that I got from this guy. Mimosa, Willamo is Anyo, not really a very good actress. Like her line delivery in the scene when she's trying to hype up a Tommy was pretty bad. Onni Tommila is Schutz. It was so. felt the same way about anyone else that was in the movie. And when it comes to their performances, they were just kind of there. They were just serviceable. The only performer that really was a standout and really did a strong job was Jorma. Now, other things that stand out about the movie, like I said earlier, are the technical elements. The cinematography by Kajel Lagaruz, gorgeous. Just beautiful cinematography. The editing by Yuho Verolian, I definitely felt that that was rather solid, and I definitely do feel that for the most part, the editing was definitely something that was very well put together and well executed, and definitely did help a lot of the action sequences be even more exciting and even more of a rush. The music by Yuri Sepa and Thomas Wanola, it was there for me, but it wasn't anything that was like significantly memorable or iconic. It was in the middle. The film does have some moments where it's lower budget, definitely does show up on the screen with some chintzy looking green screen at points and some pretty fake looking CGI blood and gore. I would have liked to have seen more practical effects. That's another thing that I would have liked to have seen more with this instead of so much CGI gore and violence. Like there are aftermath shots, like bodies ran over by tanks and blown up by mines and other stuff. And there's a few bits of practical stuff, but a lot of it is CGI and it's not that great. So that definitely is something that hampers the film a little bit as well. But it's like an hour and 20 something minutes with the end credits, so it goes by at a decent enough pace despite it sagging a bit in the middle. And yeah, it's fun. It's definitely an enjoyable movie. I would recommend it if it's looks like something that could be potentially interesting or worth your while. But I'm not gonna sit here and say that it's like a great, amazing film either. It was fun. I enjoyed it. But I definitely don't think I'll watch this again anytime soon. Especially over other action films that take place during World War II or just other action films in general. But that's just me. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Sisu. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.